I'm David. Thank you for joining me in this how to play video of Everdell. If you haven't had a chance yet, please check out our review video and playthrough. Everdell is part of our project to do videos on the top 100 family games as rated by Board Game Geek users. As you see behind me is a sample of the top 20 of that top 100 list. And as of October 2019, Everdell is now in the top 10 family games. So Everdell is that you're part of the Everdell Valley. You're playing your different critters. Could be your either mice or squirrels, for instance, building your city in the valley. And so over 4 rounds, you got to acquire the most victory points, and whoever does will win. And how do you acquire victory points? Well, you'll be placing your workers around the board to get different resources, to buy cards, as you see here. So let's go over the setup. The first thing to do is each player needs to pick their critter. So if I were to be the mice, I take 2, and Julie would take 2 squirrels, and then you would place the other ones up here in the tree. Now, before I put them up here in the tree, I need to show you that the rule book will show you how to put it together, and some events that you can acquire during the game will go underneath the tree here. So for instance, if you get the monument, if you acquire 3 buildings or critters with the governance token here, as you see here, and I'll show you in the rule book here. Here's on page 10, we'll show you the different symbols. So you have traveler symbols, production, destination, governance, and prosperity. So the reason why I'm showing you this first, because you won't be able to see it on camera with the tree there. So if you get 3 governance tokens on either critters or buildings, you can put your worker here, and then you would get it for 3 victory points. Here is the, I'm sorry, I have in the wrong spot, the Grand Tour, which you have to get 3 destinations. Here is the Harvest Festival, get 4 production symbols. And here is the Cartographer Expedition, get 3 traveler symbols. So that will be underneath the tree, which you won't be able to see on camera. And you can acquire those later on in the game if you assign a worker there and meet the requirements. So the next thing that you'll need to do is you're going to take the special event cards and you'll shuffle up the deck and place 4 on the branches of the tree here. So let me show you the 4 that I picked. You won't be using all of them every game. So you'll see there's one thing that the rule book didn't show an example of, is what does this mean here? Well, you have a prerequisite. If you're able to get the wood carver and the chapel, and you place a worker here, you will get this special event tile, get to carry out the action, and get it for 2 victory points. And so this one here, you need the cemetery and the shepherd, and that will be worth 3 victory points. And again, you would read if any special things you get when you acquire it. And it's a one-time use thing usually. You need here the doctor and the postal pigeon. It'll give you 3 victory points. And if you acquire the undertaker and the bridge, and again, it's having trouble focusing, bridge toad. See if I can get that in focus here. You can get that for 6 victory points. And it even says here, for instance, when achieved, pay 2 berries and discard 2 cards from your city. That's how you get that 6 victory points. So you got to be prepared to do that when you meet the condition. Otherwise, don't put your worker there, because then you won't be able to, you also have to meet that condition as well. So this will go on the tree. So not only are you going to get victory points on cards that you acquire, but you can get victory points on these special events and on the other events, as I already went over. So up here, though, you'll see that, again, I'll have to show you real quick here, underneath my camera. So each player is going to put 1 worker here, and you'll get a production. See, we start in winter. And after everybody passes, then you'll, well, actually, when a player passes, they'll get their next worker and get to produce any cards, any buildings or critters that produce. You'll get your production. But and then you'll get your +1 worker. That's in the spring. And then in the summer, you'll get another worker and draw 2 meadow cards. And then in the autumn, you'll get your last 2 workers. So you'll have 6 in the last turn, unless you use a cemetery, which I'll go over in a minute here. And also get to produce, again, any of your critters or buildings. So you can't see that underneath the camera. So I put it back here. So Julie and I, I'll place my mouse, 1 mouse, and she'll place 1 squirrel. Again, that's for the spring. We'll get another one in the summer, and then we'll get 2 in the autumn. So again, we're starting in the winter. Oops. It's actually a very sturdy build. I'm just being klutzy. All right, then you'll notice here I've placed the twigs into this spot. I've placed resin. Now these are resources you can use to acquire cards, pebbles and berries. And then you see there's a forest card deck here. Again, you're not going to play with all the cards. With 2 players, we're only going to play 3 forest cards, which are spots here to place them. And in a 3 or 4 player game, you're going to play 4 forest cards. So I randomly draw 3, put the other ones off to the side. They're not used in this game. So let's take a look at what I drew. All right, so this one gives you other options to place your workers. In a 2-player game or 3-player game, you cannot place a worker here. So in other words, only 1 player per round can place a worker here because it's an exclusive space. When it's closed, that means it's exclusive. So if I put a worker here, I'll get 2 cards and any 1 resource. So that's a symbol for any resource. So I can get a twig, resin, pebble, or berry. This one is that if I put a worker here, I'll get 2 resin and a twig. And then this one, I'll get 3 cards and 1 pebble if I put a worker here. Now some cards, if I just go show you a few of them here, require you to discard things. So let me find an example of that. So part of this game is that you'll be discarding your meadow cards to get victory points or carry out special actions. So even though I didn't draw it for this game, this one says discard up to 3 cards and gain 1 of any of each, 1 any for each card. So if I discard 2 cards, I can get 2 any resources I want. It could be the same resource or different resources. So I could discard 2 cards and get a twig or a pebble, for instance. So now we have our different locations. That changes every game. That way there's variety. So I put them here in the clearings. Now, this space here is exclusive. The first player to put a worker here will get 3 twigs. However, this is not exclusive. The same player or multiple players can put more than 1 worker here each action and get 2 twigs and a card. Here, again, it's exclusive to resin, or the non-exclusive is 1 resin and 1 card. Here is, right here is 1 pebble. And then here is non-exclusive. You can get 2 cards and a victory point. And that's what these chips are here, different victory points. Here, the non-exclusive is 1 berry, but the exclusive is 1 berry and 1 card. So now you know where you can put your workers. This is what you'll do to get resources. And then as I mentioned here, on top of the tree and under the tree are events and special events where you can put a worker to claim it if you meet the conditions. So now you have the deck here. Normally the deck will go underneath the tree, will slide right underneath here, and you draw 8 meadow cards. Now I have what's in the deck. There's duplicates of all these cards I'm going to go over here in a moment. But there's 128 cards, so it's unlikely in a 2-player game you're probably only going to go through half the deck. Now I don't know what it's like with a 3 or 4-player game if you'll go through all the cards, but I know in a 2-player game you'll be lucky if you get through half the deck. So you'll reveal 8 cards. And any player can acquire these cards on their turn. And you do that by meeting the conditions, which I'll go over here in a moment. And then the rest of the cards will go underneath here. I did forget to go over 2 other locations. Right here is the journey section. Okay, so there's a rule about going on a journey. You could only do it in autumn. So that's going to be at the very last round of the game. So again, just to reiterate, we go, right now we're in winter, then we're going to go into spring, summer, and then autumn, the very last round of the game. We could start occupying these. And again, you discard cards equal to the number here. So if I discard 3 cards, I'll get 3. All right, so the last thing to do is give cards to each player. Whoever goes first will get 5 cards. The second player would get 6 because we're just doing a 2-player game. Oops, I only have 5 because I'm first. So as the first player, I'd get these 5 cards, I'd look at them, and I can play cards out of my hand, or I can acquire cards out of my hand or acquire cards here. And then Julie would look at her 6 cards as to what she has. So she would put it here with her 2 squirrels. Now when you're building your city, you can have up to 15 cards in your city, and that's including critters and buildings. So I'll go over that in a moment, but let's say if Julie did manage to acquire all these, she would create a row like this, and then another row. This is what the rule book suggests. So eventually you would have 3 rows of 5. Now if you do acquire a special event, it does not count as a space in your city. I'm sorry, a basic event doesn't count as a space in your city, neither do special events. So these should be off to the side here. So let's go over now how the cards are made up and what you can do on your turn. So on my camera here, you'll see that I've grouped them by their building types. And there's usually a critter associated with each building. The only one that says any is the Evertree. And I'll explain why that's important. But if you want to know what it costs to build something, it's 3 twigs, 3 resin, and 3 pebbles. And this is a prosperity marker. And it's worth 5 victory points. However, it can be worth more. It's worth 1 victory point for each other prosperity in your city. And this is a unique construction. So that's an important thing to remember, that if it's unique, that means you can only have 1 of those in your city. Now why does it matter here that I said that's any? It's because I could build this, I would turn in the resources I need, and then once it's in my city, I can build any critter I want. Let's say I want to build a husband, or a critter comes to my city. I don't have to pay the 3 berry cost. However, because I use the Evertree to get that free action, I put it right here to show that I cannot get it again. Even if the husband somehow leaves my city, I cannot use the Evertree again to get a free critter. So let's take a look at the other prosperities. And the reason why I'm showing you this is because if you want to get to basic events, you kind of have to know which cards give you prosperity. And critters can do that as well. So here we have the palace. Again, very expensive. And if you build the palace first, you can build your queen for free. So let me zoom in here a little bit. And you notice that sometimes, and she's a unique, so I mean you can only have 1 queen in your city. You'll see here there's a symbol here. That means you can put your worker here, and if you do, you can play meadow cards worth up to 3 for free. So that means that it would come from either your hand or from the meadow. So you got to remember that when you play a card, you got to look at what action. Well, first off, if this was in my city, the palace, and then I say I'm going to use another, I'm going to play the queen card for free, and then next turn I could put my mouse here, worker, and then play a card out of my hand. What did I have here? I could play the wife, I could play the ruins, the farm, The king I could not play because it's costs 4. All right, so notice she's a destination symbol. So she would count for that type of event if I was going for that. So that's the palace with the queen. And again, I could play the queen first, pay the 5 berries to play her. And if I later play the palace, I wouldn't be able to, I would have to have the palace in my city first in order to, it doesn't go in reverse order. So there's no cards that I'm aware of that allow you to play a critter first and then play the construction for free. All right, so that's the palace and the queen. So we have the theater and the bard here. Again, that's a prosperity token, but the bard is a traveler. So that gives you a different token. Sorry, a different symbol. And all these cards do different things. And again, I'm just showing you. Here's a castle, and the king goes, and they're both prosperity symbols. And notice the king costs 6 berries, and the castle is very expensive. And again, it will give you, now this is interesting here. For the castle, it'll give you +1 victory point for each common construction in your city. So unfortunately, all these, if you were to even get these out, it's very expensive. These are all unique constructions. All right, so those are the prosperities. There's only one traveler construction. And if you were to play it first, you could play the peddler. Again, if you want to know where I'm looking here, you got to look really small here. And it's going to be very hard to see in camera here. It says basically here ruins, and on the ruins, it tells you here what critter can you place for free on the right hand corner here. So there's only one traveler type construction, but you're going to see there's a lot of critters with traveler symbols here. Now, anytime you play a card with a production, you can produce if you meet the conditions. So let's say I do pay my 2 berries, and the peddler, I place a peddler in my city. You may pay up to 2 other resources to gain an equal amount of other resources. So say I had 2 twigs, and I want 2 twigs, and I want to switch them out for pebbles. I can do that. Now, I don't have to do both. I don't even have to do this action, but whenever I play this card the first time, it gets its production. And then, this is important to remember, in your city, you look at any of those cards with that production, that green production symbol, will get production in the next season, which is spring. And then we get production again in going into autumn. We do not get production when we are going into summer. Again, those are the 3 things I showed you right here. All right, so back to showing other cards. Okay, so peddler goes with the ruins. That's the only construction with the traveler token. So here's the governance. So we have the dungeon and the ranger. Notice the ranger is a traveler, but the dungeon is a governance. We have, I'm not showing it correctly in the camera here. And you'll see, you'll have to decide what are the advantages of either playing the construction first or the ranger first, if you happen to have them in your hand. You might not have them in your hand, and you might just have to play the ranger and hope you get a dungeon later. Or you play the dungeon, hoping that you can get a ranger later to play for free, but it might not even come up. So here is the courthouse and the historian, which is a bat. I'm sorry. Historian and the clock tower. I had them reversed there. Historian and the clock tower. The courthouse and the judge go together. And notice the victory points are here. Crane and the architect. Now, this is an important thing to point out, because sometimes you'll acquire a card, you'll put it in your city, but then you'll discard it later. When playing a construction, you may discard this crane from your city to place that construction for 3 fewer resources. So let's say I had this in my city, and I wanted to acquire the courthouse. Okay, the courthouse could be in my hand, or it could be out here in the meadow. So it doesn't matter if it's in my hand or in the meadow. I'm going to discard the crane card, and I can use that to pay for 2 pebbles and 1 resin. And if I had the twig, then I can put it into my city. So again, it makes this card a lot cheaper if I discard the crane. Notice though, it would have taken me 1 pebble to build it first, but then I would discard it to get that cheaper. Okay, so the next group of cards to show you are the destination cards and their associated critters. So here we have the inn and the innkeeper. Again, this is one where you can put a worker on it, and this is nice. Play a critter or construction from the meadow for 3 fewer, not from your hands. That's an important little thing to remember here. Okay, the post office and the postal pigeon. Now this is an interesting one, the cemetery and the undertaker. When you play the cemetery, you can permanently remove one of your critters from the game. And then if you do, you'll see right here is where we'll have discarded cards. So let's say there was a pile of them up here already, because we might have been discarding cards to get more resources here. I don't know if I went over this. You may discard any card from your hand. For every 2 cards you discard, gain 1 resource. And so this is an open one, so it's not exclusive. You can put as many workers as you want there, and as many players can go there as they want. So if we're looking here at the cemetery, my worker is permanently removed. I would draw 4 cards from a discard pile, and then I would be able to place one of these for free. So not very valuable cards in terms of victory points, but if I didn't have enough berries, maybe I would want to play the judge. Now you would need the undertaker though to get a second cemetery symbol. So I would have to have the undertaker in my city, and then if I did, I could have another worker pass on and get the effect of that cemetery ability. Okay, so here's the chapel and the shepherd. Now this is another one of those cards you got to pay attention here. So when I place them in my city, I'll gain 3 berries. Then gain 1 victory point for each victory point on your chapel. So I would have to have the chapel in play already. And so place 1 victory point on this chapel. Then, so I do that. That's if I put a worker here. Okay, to get this I have to place a worker here. So I place a worker here, I get 1 victory point. Then draw 2 metal cards for each victory point on the chapel. So then I get 2 of these. And then if I were to play the shepherd later, let's say I play it for free, I get 3 berries. And then, because I already have 1 victory point on the chapel, I get a victory point for that as well. And then let's say in another round I do it again. And then because I'd get another victory point on the chapel, now I draw 4 cards because I have 2 victory points there. But then I would not get this again for the shepherd because I've already played the shepherd, and he's a unique critter. So I can only have 1 shepherd in my city. So maybe I would want to hold on to this card for a while and get a whole bunch of victory points on my chapel before I play the shepherd. But the issue is, though, there's only so many rounds in the game, so I'd have to time this just right. Okay, so moving on. So we have a university and a doctor. So again, it has that where I can place a worker on there to get an ability. Here is the lookout and the wanderer. Now the wanderer is an important critter. The critters do not take up a space in your city. So remember when I was showing you over here, Julie's city? The critter would go off to the side here if she were to acquire it and would not count against her 15 critters or buildings in her city. Okay, then you have a monastery and the monk. Now you would have to get the monk to unlock a second monastery ability here. So notice that these are all destinations, but then there are also critters with different symbols that go with these buildings. Okay, the last one to go over is all the production ones. Here you have the twig barge, which is a production. So when I put this in my city, I will get two twigs right away. And then in spring and autumn, I'll get another 2 twigs each time. And then the toad, also when I place the toad, he'll also produce 2 twigs for each farm in your city. So this is a great way to chain things. That if I have a bunch of farms, and if I play the toad, say I have 2 farms, I can get 4 twigs. Again, more production. Here's a resin refinery, gain 2 resin. And then here, activate 1 other production in your city. So not only do I, when I put it down, I get to do that, but in the spring and autumn, I also get to activate that again. So it can be like a chain reaction. In the spring, I get 2 resin for this card, and then I use my chip sweep to activate this card again and get another, 1 resin. I misread that. So I get 1 resin, activate again to get a second resin. My eyes are failing me. All right, so here, teacher in a school. Again, if you want to see this, just pause it and you can look a little closer. Here is the wood carver in the storehouse. Again, remember you can only have 1 unique critter and 1 unique building in your city. Here's a shopkeeper and general store. Here's the mine and the monk. And the mines are nice because they give you pebbles. Pebbles are pretty hard to get. Here's a fairgrounds and the fool. Now here's a special one because it's unique. You can only put 1 in someone else's city, but it takes up a space in their city and they'll lose 2 victory points. So the ideal thing is you place the fairgrounds, you get 2 meadow cards, and then if you have it, if the fool is in the meadow or in your hand, you can put it in someone else's city for free. And then here is a special one here. The farm, the husband, and the wife. So the husband and the wife, doesn't matter which one's played first, but if they do, or if they are played at some point in the game, they will go in the same city space. And notice the husband's worth 2, and the wife is worth 2, but when paired with the husband's worth 3 more. So if you have these 2 together, that's 2, it's 5, 7 points. And the farm, I mean, you could place one of them for free because normally it would cost 5 berries to do both of these. And notice that with the husband, you're only going to gain a resource of your choice if paired with the wife, and you have at least 1 farm in the city. So he doesn't produce too well until you have the wife and the farm. So those are all the different cards. Again, it's worth going over all the different types of cards because you're going to have to think about when you're playing, do I build something first in order to play that critter, get that critter for free? Or can I not afford to wait to do that? I got to play the critter first maybe to get its production, and then you'll play the building later, which is just the way it goes. Just keep in mind that you can, if you do pay the costs, for instance, this husband costs 3 berries, and I put it into my city, and then you would reveal the next card right away. Because sometimes you can acquire cards that allow you to get another card right away. So that's why it's important to know that you can replace any cards that have been placed in the meadow. Now you can only have up to 8 cards in your hand. So remember, I was the first player and I had 5 cards. And if I ever have to, say I had 6 and I was going to draw, and I could draw 3 more cards, actually they would come from here, not from the discard pile. I can only draw up to 8. Even though I might have been able to draw 3, I can't go over 8 cards in my hand. Okay, so the only other thing to go over is the turn sequence. It's really easy. You either play one of your workers, or you play a card, or you end the season and pass. Now it's important to remember this, that if I end the season and I pass, now let's say I've done that. I went here during my turn and I got 2 resin, and I discarded some cards here to get more resources, and I'm done purchasing cards and I have no more workers. Julie went over here and got a pebble. Julie still has 1 worker left. Now when it comes to my turn, I'm not buying any cards, out of my hand or out of the meadow, and I have no more workers. So I say I pass. So when I pass, my workers come off. I get my worker for the next season, and then I produce. I produce my resources. By the way, at any time there's not enough berries or pebbles or resin or twigs, you use a substitute. They're not the supply is not limited by what's here on the board. So the important point, though, is that I passed and my workers came off. Julie still has a worker left. And because I vacated that space, now she could take this. I'm no longer there. It's not exclusive anymore. And then she can get the 2 resin. So that's a strategy in the game, that if you can hold on to your workers and wait for someone else to pass, that's great, because then you can take their spaces that they might have taken that you wanted. So at the end of the game, you'll count up all your victory points, and as I mentioned, right here, your victory points will be here, and then you'll need to pay attention to any special cards where they say, like I showed you on the, trying to find that again. So at the end of the game, for instance, if I had for each unused resin and pebble to a maximum 6. So if I had a whole bunch of unused pebbles and resin, at the end of the game I can get up to 6 victory points if I had that many. So this could be worth up to 8 points. And you would count any events or special events you would have acquired, and then the one with the most points wins. Now, I didn't remember this here. Is there a issue if they tie? And here it is. If there is a tie, and I'll show you right here, the player who achieved the most events wins. If there's still a tie, the player with the most leftover resources is a winner. Now, I assume there might be even a tie with that, but it doesn't go into it, so I guess it is possible to share the victory. All right, so watch the playthrough if you want to see how Julie and I take turns in a 2-player game. If you haven't had a chance, also watch the review. So if we get 100 likes, we'll do a playthrough on how to play and review with the expansion. So please remember to subscribe and like. I'm David.